General Althea Vance was not a woman to be underestimated. In the United States Air Force, where the skies were both a battlefield and a canvas for ambition, she had risen through the ranks with a quiet, unrelenting force. Her career was a tapestry woven with threads of impossible missions, groundbreaking tactical innovations, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. She was a master strategist, a pilot who had logged thousands of hours in the cockpit of various aircraft, and a leader whose name was spoken with a mixture of reverence and fear. Her reputation was that of a commander who could cut through bureaucracy with surgical precision and motivate a faltering unit to achieve peak performance. Her newest challenge was the sprawling, antiquated Fort Meridian, a joint service logistics and transport hub located in a dusty, forgotten corner of the Arizona desert. Fort Meridian was a logistical nightmare, a place where planes were grounded by a lack of parts, where cargo manifests were lost in a sea of paperwork, and where the prevailing culture was one of apathy and The previous commander, a jaded and unambitious general, had let the post slide into a state of operational inertia. The reports on her desk painted a grim picture: millions of dollars wasted, critical supply lines bottlenecked, and a general decline in morale that was as palpable as the desert heat. General Vance's arrival was, by design, as low-key as her approach to leadership was direct. She abhorred theatrical displays and the empty pageantry of rank. Instead of arriving in a C-17 with a full staff and a welcoming party, she piloted a small, unremarkably painted C-21 Learjet herself. Her attire was her standard-issue flight suit, worn and comfortable, with a single, unadorned leather jacket thrown over it. Her hair was tucked neatly into a simple ponytail beneath a well-worn ball cap. The only hint of her rank were the subtle, silver stars on the collar of her flight suit, partially obscured by the collar of her jacket. She looked less like a four-star general and more like a seasoned pilot returning from a routine cross-country flight. As she taxied the C-21 to a stop on a remote, crumbling section of the tarmac, she noticed the usual chaos of Fort Meridian's flight line. Ground crew personnel, their uniforms, looking more like work rags than military attire, were moving slowly, their movements lethargic. A truck, its engine backfiring loudly, was parked haphazardly, blocking a key access point. The entire scene was a testament to the reports she had read: a place where professionalism had gone to die. A small ground crew detail, a handful of airmen, and an NCO, was waiting, though with an air of profound boredom rather than a sense of purpose. They were leaning against a dilapidated baggage cart, their posture a collective slouch. One, a young airman with a cocky grin, was holding a phone to his ear, laughing loudly. The NCO, a staff sergeant named Jenkins, was idly kicking at a loose piece of asphalt, his gaze fixed on some point in the distance. They were so engrossed in their own world that they didn't notice the pilot climbing out of the small jet until she was standing on the tarmac, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The young airman, Airman First Class Reynolds, finally looked up, his eyes widening slightly as he saw her. He nudged the NCO. "Hey, Jenkins, check it out." "Another pilot." He said it with a clear note of condescension, as if pilots were a dime a dozen and not worth his time. General Vance walked toward them, her face a neutral mask of observation. She didn't announce her presence. She simply wanted to see their initial reaction, their unvarnished attitude. Staff Sergeant Jenkins, a man whose military bearing had long since dissolved, finally paid attention. Kai took, in her flight suit, the lack of an immediate entourage, and her gender. He sneered slightly. "What's up, ma'am? Lost your way?" "The pilot's lounge is over there," he said, gesturing vaguely with his thumb toward a low, gray building. The insult was clear. A woman pilot, in his mind, was a novelty at best, and a nuisance at worst. General Vance stopped a few feet from the group, her duffel bag still on her shoulder. Her eyes, sharp and clear, swept over each of them. "I'm looking for the Flight Operations Office," she said, her voice even and calm, but carrying a weight that should have given them pause. Airman Reynolds, his confidence bolstered by the general indifference of his superiors, decided to get in on the action. "Flight ops. What? You forgot your manifest. That's what a co-pilot's for, sweetie," he said with a wink and a chuckle. The rest of the crew snickered. They saw a woman, not an officer. They saw an easy target, not a person to be respected. The rank on her collar, small and silver, was invisible to them. General Vance felt the familiar knot of professional disappointment tighten in her stomach. The arrogance, the misogyny, the complete and utter lack of discipline, it was all here, just as the reports had foretold. "My co-pilot is handling the paperwork," she said, her voice growing colder. "I need to get to the commandant's office. Is there someone who can drive me?" Staff Sergeant Jenkins let out a full, mocking laugh. "The commandant's office? For you, don't you think you're getting a little ahead of yourself, ma'am? You fly in on a two-bit jet, and think you can just waltz in and get a personal audience with the big guy. He doesn't even know who you are." "On the contrary," General Vance said, her eyes never leaving his. "He's expecting me. Or, at least, he should be." Jenkins scoffed, his face hardening. "Look, lady, you either a contractor who got lost, or you a new hire who thinks she's hot stuff. Either way, you're not getting a ride. You can walk. It's a few miles, but you look like you could use the exercise." He and the other airmen laughed again, a sound that grated on her nerves. "Is that how you greet all officers on the tarmac, Staff Sergeant?" General Vance asked, the quiet intensity of her voice cutting through their laughter. Jenkins's face flushed with anger. He saw her as a threat to his small, lazy fiefdom, and he was not about to back down. "I don't know who you think you are, but you've got no rank here, no authority. I'm in charge of this detail, and you're not getting a ride car. Now, you can stand there all day, but we've got work to do." He gestured toward the haphazardly parked truck, a pathetic attempt to show his authority. General Vance took a slow, deliberate step toward him. "Staff Sergeant Jenkins, you are in a military uniform. You are on a military installation. You have just been insubordinate to an officer. That is a court-martial offense. I would advise you to choose your next words very carefully." This only seemed to fuel Jenkins's defiance. He was so far gone in his arrogance that he couldn't see the danger he was in. He saw a female officer, and in his mind, she had no real power. "Oh, a court-martial. Who's gonna court-martial me? You're a pilot, not a judge, and you're nothing but a junior officer. So you're not even in a position to give me orders." He made a loud, scoffing sound, and the other airmen, emboldened by their NCO, laughed along with him. Jess. Then a small, pristine staff car, a sedan with official markings, pulled onto the tarmac. Out of it stepped a young, impeccably dressed colonel, the Fort Meridian Provost Marshal, Colonel Ramirez. He had been sent to the flight line to investigate a report of a civilian aircraft that had landed without clearance. He was a stickler for the rules, a man who believed in discipline, and he was not happy. He saw the group of slacking ground crew and the solitary pilot in the flight suit. Colonel Ramirez strode toward the group, his face a mask of professional displeasure. Staff Sergeant Jenkins, what in God's name is going on here? Who is this pilot, and why is she being delayed? Jenkins, still oblivious, puffed out his chest. Colonel, sir, this pilot here is causing a fuss. Claims she's a general, but she's not even in her proper uniform. I've told her she's not getting a ride, but she's being difficult. Colonel Ramirez's brow furrowed. He looked at the woman. Her posture, her demeanor, the way she was holding herself fit, was not the way a junior officer carried herself. There was a quiet authority about her that was unmistakable. He took a hesitant step closer, his eyes scanning her uniform. His gaze fell upon the small, silver stars on her collar, half hidden by her jacket. He blinked, a cold wave of dread washing over him. The stars were not two, as a major general would have, but for silver stars, a full general, the highest rank in the Air Force. He snapped to attention, his hand flying to his brow in a perfect, rigid salute. Jeanette Vance Maham. My deepest apologies, Guy. I was not informed of your arrival. His voice was filled with a mixture of terror and shame. The airmen, including Staff Sergeant Jenkins, stopped laughing. The sight of a full colonel, the provost marshal of the entire post, saluting a pilot in a grimy flight suit and a ball cap, was something they had never seen before. They looked at the colonel, then at the woman, then back at the colonel, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. General Vance returned the salute with a slight nod. At ease, Colonel. And you are correct. My arrival was meant to be unannounced. She turned her attention back to the ground crew, her eyes as cold and hard as steel. Staff Sergeant Jenkins, Airman Reynolds, and the rest of you, stand to attention, now. The group snapped into a rigid, trembling formation, their faces pale with shock. Jenkins, his mouth agape, could only stare at her. The full weight of his colossal mistake, the full gravity of his insubordination, had just hit him with the force of a freight train. General Vance didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words, low and precise, were more terrifying than any scream. In the last 8 minutes, I have observed a total of 6 major security and protocol violations. You failed to properly greet a commissioned officer. You failed to maintain situational awareness on a secure flight line. Cuff. You were insubordinate. You were disrespectful. You made misogynistic comments to a senior officer. And you failed to carry out a lawful order to provide transportation. Each of these offenses, alone, is a tirender. Together, they are a complete and utter disgrace. She looked at Colonel Ramirez. Colonel, these men are a vivid example of the rot that has set in at Fort Meridian. They have no discipline, no respect for authority, and no understanding of their mission. This is not a ground crew. This is a liability. Colonel Ramirez. his face a mask of shame, could only nod. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." Staff Sergeant Jenkins, General Vance continued, her voice like a whisper of ice. "Your lack of professionalism and your insubordination are a direct reflection of your leadership. You will be relieved of your duties, effective immediately, and you will be confined to quarters pending an investigation. Airman Reynolds, you will join him. The rest of you. You will report to the Provost Marshal's office at 0800 hours on Monday for a full review of basic military protocols. Then, you will be given a remedial training course on professional conduct. If you fail, you will be reassigned. Understood?" Jenkins, his voice a barely audible croak, managed to stammer out a "yes, ma'am." "Now," General Vance said, turning her gaze back to Colonel Ramirez, "I believe you owe me a ride to the Commandant's office, and you can brief me on the state of the post on the way, Co. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to talk about." With that, she gestured to the staff car. Colonel Ramirez, still trembling slightly, opened the back door for her. She climbed in, her duffel bag still on her shoulder. As the car drove off, she could see the ground crew, the once arrogant and mocking men, standing at attention, their heads bowed in shame, their world having just been turned upside down by a quiet woman in a flight suit. The aftermath of her arrival was a whirlwind. The news of the incident at the flight line spread like wildfire. The story was retold 100 times, but the core details remained the same. The new general, a woman who had arrived in a simple jet, had taken down a disrespectful ground crew and their NCO in a matter of minutes. The shockwave of her authority had rippled through the entire post. The base's atmosphere changed almost overnight. Soldiers who had been ambling around with their hands in their pockets now walked with a sense of purpose. Officers who had been content with their mediocrity were now nervous and on edge. The commandant, a jaded and unambitious general who had let the rot set in, was relieved of his command and placed on administrative leave within hours of Vance's arrival. General Vance spent the rest of the day in her new office, a stark room with a large window overlooking the flight line. She had a file on every officer, every department head, every major contractor. The rot, she realized, was even deeper and more widespread than the reports had suggested. But she was not one to be deterred. She was a general who believed in leading from the front, a woman who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. Her first post-wide assembly was a testament to her command. She stood on a stage, her back straight, her face a mask of cold determination. She spoke about duty, honor, and country. She spoke about the legacy of the Air Force and the need for discipline, not just in the ranks, but in the heart. She didn't mince words. She told them that the days of complacency were over, that the future of Fort Meridian and their careers depended on their ability to rise to the occasion. The soldiers listened intently. They had never heard an officer speak like this before. She wasn't giving a pep talk. She was giving a mission statement. She was telling them that mediocrity would no longer be tolerated. The ground crew from the flight line, including Staff Sergeant Jenkins and Airman Reynolds, were a case study in her methods. They were a vivid example of everything that was wrong with the post, and she made sure they were seen as such. They spent the next 2 weeks in a grueling, round-the-clock remedial training program, where they were taught everything from proper military protocol to the basic tenets of professional conduct. They were broken down and rebuilt, and by the end of it, they were no longer the arrogant, mocking men they had been. They were soldiers, and they had a newfound respect for their duty and their commander. In a strange way, General Vance's arrival at Fort Meridian had been a blessing. She was the storm that had been needed to clear the air. She was a general who had been mocked by her own men, a woman who had been underestimated at every turn. But now, no one would ever make that mistake again. She had arrived, and Fort Meridian would never be the same.